So the Western Ghat runs in the Arabian Sea, and land between these is known as Konkan, and it goes up to Goa and beyond the Kannada. The southernmost part is known as Malabar coast. The passes in the Western Ghats are like Kanheri, Karle, Junnar, linked the trade route of the western ports. The Deccan Plateau acted as a bridge between the north and the south. However, the dense forest in the Vindhya mountains make this region isolated from the north. The language and culture in the southern peninsula are preserved intact for a long time due to the geographical isolation. So the reason why the southern peninsula and the culture, the language the southern peninsula has is been in isolation is because of the passes, which are very few, and they act as a bridge between the northern India and the southern India. However, dense forest in the Vindhya mountains makes the region isolated from the north. So the one region because of the isolation of the southern peninsula from the northern region of the India, like Himalayan mountains and the Gangetic plains, is because of the dense forest, and second because of the various passes that are there in the Vindhya mountains. In the southern end remains the famous Palghat Pass. It is the passage across the Ghats from the Kaveri River Valley. The Palghat River Pass here is a pass that passes through the Kaveri Valley to the Malabar coast. The Palghat Pass was an important trade route for the Indo-Roman trade. So you can say the Palghat Pass was an important route for Indo-Roman trade in the ancient times. So when Romans and you can say the existed Roman Empire somewhat traded with India, but the pass which they used was the Palghat Pass. The Anai Mudi is the highest peak in the southern peninsula, and Doda Peta is another highest peak in the western Ghats. So the highest peak in the southern peninsula is Annamudi, and Doda Peta is another highest peak in the western Ghats. The eastern Ghats are not very high, have several openings caused by the eastward flow of the rivers into the Bay of Bengal. So the eastern Ghats are not very high and have several openings caused by the eastward flow of rivers into the Bay of Bengal. The port cities of Arikamedu, Mamlapuram and Kaveri Pattanam were situated on the Coromandel coast. So the port cities we discussed are Arikamedu, Mamlapuram and Kaveri Pattanam. They are situated on the coast of the Coromandel. Now the major rivers of the southern peninsula are almost running parallel. So the major rivers in southern peninsula are running parallel. Mahanadi is at the eastern of the peninsula, and the Narmada and Tapti run from east to west. Other rivers like Godavari, Krishna, Tungabhadra and Kaveri flow from west to east. So what we can say that Mahanadi is at the eastern of the peninsula, southern peninsula. Narmada and Tapti run from the east to west. On the other hand, Godavari, Krishna, Tungabhadra, Kaveri flow from west to east. These rivers make the plateau into a fertile rice producing soil. So earlier we learned that how Indo-Gangetic plain is quite fertile and produce a lot of wealth because of the presence of the alluvial soil. The same kind of nature is of the southern peninsula because of the presence of the rivers like Mahanadi, Narmada, Tapati, Godavari, Krishna, Tungabhadra, Kaveri, and it is important in producing rice and soil. Throughout the history, the region between Krishna, Tungabhadra, the Raichur Dwab, just like there is a Dwab between Yamuna and Ganga, there is also a Dwab between Krishna and Tungabhadra. It is known as Raichur Dwab, remained a bone for contention between the major kingdoms of the south. The deltic plains formed by these two rivers at their mouth became famous under Satavahanas. So when the kings of Satavahanas came into prominence, these two rivers, the deltic plains formed by these two rivers at their mouth became important. A number of towns and ports flourished in these plains in the beginning of a Christian era. So when the East India Company came into India, there was a lot of Christian towns that were established in the southern peninsula across the Raichur Dwab between the Krishna and Tungabhadra. Now let's move on to the Kaveri Delta. The Kaveri Delta constitutes a distinct geographical zone in the far south. It became seat of the Chola power. The Kaveri Basin, with its rich tradition, language and culture, has flourished from the ancient times. As the southern peninsula is gifted with a long coastline, the people of this region took keen interest in the maritime activities. A great deal of trade, commerce went on through the seaways from the earliest time. In the east, mariners reached countries like Java, Sumatra, Burma and Cambodia. So we learned that the Kaveri Delta became the seat for the Chola power. At the same time, Kaveri Basin was very rich in tradition, language, culture and has flourished from ancient times. As southern peninsula is gifted with a long coastline, the people of this region took keen interest in the maritime activities. A great deal of trade, commerce went on through the seaways from the earliest times. In the east, mariners reached countries like Java, Sumatra, Burma and Cambodia. So you can say for the trade, so as we know, Chola Empire expanded its position into the southern eastern part of the continent, and Southeast Asia was a great trade partner for the Chola Empire for 1,000 years of its existence. The Eastern Ghats acted as a great place for trade to countries like Java, Sumatra, Burma and Cambodia. Apart from the trade, they spread Indian art, religion, culture in these parts of the world. The commercial contact between South India and the Greco-Roman countries flourished around the cultural relations. So you know, as we studied, that Indo-Roman trade also existed between the people of the southern India and the people of the Roman Empire due to the Palghat Pass. Similar kind of things were there in the southern region just because of the Eastern Ghats, the Western Ghats and the rivers flowing across the region. India, a land of unity in diversity. The history of ancient India is interesting because of India proved to be a melting pot of numerous races. The pre-Aryan, the Indo-Aryan, the Greeks, the Scythians, the Hunas, the Turks made India their home. Each ethnic group contributed its might to the making of Indian culture. All these peoples mixed up so inextricably with one another that at present none of them can identify in their original form. So what we can say that the region of the North India and the South India and the Indo-Gangetic plain was not well connected earlier, but due to the trade, due to the travel of the people, it became somewhat into a united country. You can see the inward movement of Aryans and Greeks, Scythians and Hunas and Turks made India their home. So they came in from the northwest part of the India, and through the passes like Khyber, Bolan, Kurram, Gomal and the northwest region of the Hindu Kush, Suleiman and Kirtar ranges. Then it went into the India and they settled into India and made it their home. Each ethnic group contributed its might to be making of the Indian culture. All these people mixed up so inextricably with one another that at present none of them can be identified in their original form. Different culture mingled with one another through ages. So basically you can say that these races were foreign to what the races were originally existing in India, but they mingled so well that today it is very difficult to find a difference between these races. All these people mixed up so inextricably with one another that at present none of them can be identified in their original form. Different cultures mingled with one another through ages. Many pre-Aryan or Dravidian terms occur in the Vedic text. So you can say that the language of the Dravid and the language of the pre-Aryans can be found in the Vedic text. Similarly, many Pali and Sanskrit terms can be found in the literature of the southern India, such as Sangam literature. Since ancient times, India has been the land of several religions. Ancient India witnessed the birth of Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, but all these cultures and religions intermingled with one another. Although Indian people speak different language, practice different religion, and observe different social customs, they follow certain common style of life throughout the country. Therefore, our country shows a deep underlying unity in spite of the great diversity. The great diversity, we are talking about the diversity of the languages, such as southern people, the people of the southern peninsula, below the Vindhya and below the region of, you can say, Satpura range, used to use Dravidian terms, while the people in northern India used Sanskrit, while in the eastern part the language was Prakrit or Pali. But even after having these differences, today the culture that exists, it is somewhat united due to geographical regions and other regions that exist in the Indian subcontinent. Birth of Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, it all started in and around the geography of India. Let's move ahead. In the fact, the ancients trove of unity, they looked upon this vast subcontinent as one land. So if you look from the perspective of a foreigner, it is considered that India is basically a united country, but that is not true. You can see from the geographical nature of India, it is different in the north, it is different in the center, and it is completely different in the south. And in the south, there is a complete difference in the eastern region of the southern peninsula and the western region of the southern peninsula, because the eastern region traded with the Southeast Asia, the western region traded with the West Asia. The unity of India is recognized by foreigners, but as an Indian staying in this country, you can say it is different in every next step you take. The name of the Bharatvarsha, or the land of Bharata, was given to the whole country after the name of the ancient tribe called Bharatas. Our ancient poet, philosophers, writers viewed the country as an integral unit. This kind of political unity was attained at least twice during Gupta and Mauryan Empire. So basically you can say that many people called it Bharatvarsha because of the Bharat tribe it is named after, but actually it is different. Very few kingdoms or empires were successfully able to unite the country into one nation. The two successful claims are Maurya and Gupta. The unity of India was also recognized by foreigners. They first came into contact with people living on the Sindhu or the Indus. So they named the whole country after this river. The word Hind is derived from the Sanskrit word Sindhu, and in course of time the country came into be known as India in Greek and Hind in Persian and Arabic language. So basically you can say the word Hind came in from the river because of the river Indus, and the name Sindhu also came in, played an important role in India being called Hindustan or India, whatever you call it, is basically derived from the river running in the western part of India, that is Indus River. So now let's move ahead. Efforts for the linguistic and the cultural unity of the country were made through ages. The 3rd century BC Prakrit language served as lingua franca of the country. So Prakrit language in the 3rd century BC was a very important language. Throughout the major portion of India, Ashoka's inscriptions were written in Prakrit language. They were not rather written in the Pali or Dravidian or Sanskrit language. Also the ancient epics, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, was studied with the same zeal, devotion throughout the country. Originally composed in Sanskrit, these epics came in to be presented in different local languages. Although the Indian cultural values ideas were expressed in different forms, the substance remained the same throughout the country. Hence, India has emerged as multi-religious, multicultural society. However, the underlying unity, integrity,